Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on and finish up this week with an album review, this time looking at an album that was highly requested the one time I looked at one song from this group. We're of course looking at the group Mirakuru Musicuru, which, according to Google Translate, does represent miracle musical, but also it's phonetically very similar, and I'm curious if it's not just the Japanese characters that would represent those syllabic sounds, and if it is sort of just gibberish. Does Mirakuru Musicuru mean anything in Japanese? It's a big coincidence if it actually did mean miracle musical while also translating to miracle musical. I don't know. If anyone has insight into that, let me know. Maybe you speak Japanese. It seems very coincidental. It almost seems like they just created gibberish utilizing the right syllables. Now, here's some really interesting stuff about this. I like to do a little bit of research before diving in. I don't want to spoil anything, but I do want to have a little bit of a jump start into some of the thematic elements, especially if it is a concept album, which I think it is. This is where I'm running into some problems. So, on December 12th, 2012, this album mysteriously drops onto Bandcamp. It is a side project of Joe Hawley, former member of Tally Hall, and something that I found out is Tally Hall was also a project that Rob Cantor was a part of, and Rob Cantor is somebody I've brought up before. I know him exclusively up to this point for creating the viral videos like 40 voice things. What is it? Impersonations? Like singing impersonations? But like he didn't actually do any of them. He just lip synced to some overdub during the peak of these types of videos. He did that. That was pretty funny. And Actual Cannibal Shia LaBeouf, which is a phenomenal song. I love watching the performance, and I'm pretty sure I brought that up in the past. I thought he was just a YouTube guy. And no, he was like part of a band. So now I guess I have to go listen to that band. Rob Cantor's also featured on this album, track number 9. We'll get to that way later down the road. And also more members of Tally Hall are present here with Zubin Zeji and Bora Karaka. So it is a side project of Joe Hawley, but is utilizing some of his bandmates and previous collaborators to work with this as well. Now, I'm a little worried because it seems that nobody really knows what this album is about. Doesn't give me a lot of high hopes for walking away from it with any sort of understanding. It says one of the album's central themes has to do with the World Trade Center, the 9/11 attacks, and a culture of people who are learning to cope with nationwide grief. According to an interview with Joe Hawley, the II in Hawaii Part 2, I guess there's use of two lowercase i's, although in the album art and in Spotify it's two capital I's. Anyways, the II in the title symbolizes the towers themselves, and he calls the project, not this album, but Miracle Musical as a whole, a World Trading Center musical. That's the second time trading has been used instead of trade. I'm very curious about that. It says, but alas, due to the lyrics' cryptic nature, the only person who knows the full picture is Joe. So that's what I'm getting into. Somebody told me to check out the outro to this album, Dream Suite in C major. We did that last year, I think it was. It was a while ago, long enough that I don't remember the song, but recent enough that I remember doing it. So probably in 2023. I should probably double check that sometime, but I was perplexed by it. I remember that. and everybody told me it's the end of a concept album, you need to do the whole thing. Well, now I'm doing the whole thing, and I don't think I'm going to walk away with any more information. I need better understanding of this because longtime fans don't really seem to know what's going on either. I don't think I'm going to be the person to shine a light in this darkness. With that said, 5 minutes is a very lengthy intro. Glad we have timestamps. I should have said this earlier, but if you wanted to skip this, the timestamps are in the description. If you're here now and you're hearing me say it, you're too late. You've already watched all of it. Let's dive into this opening track, Introduction to the Snow. I vaguely remember Dream Suite in C major also sounding very compressed and feeling like it came from an older era's technology.
Alone at the edge of a universe humming a tune with sparkling crystal souls aglow.
Even musically, call back to much older era of music.
The key of what we know to be every part without me knows only two can make it light. You'll live forever tonight.
I'm sorry, excuse me, what? That dancing synth in the background.
You had a heart you hadn't felt. Why would it hurt me? Or was it real? It was the night we had to part. We were afraid to miss the start.
The bump is kind of.
Why
I like that.
Matter? And could we heal?
There's that synth in the back again.
I was a victim of magic, of power, catching my breath as I bled on the ground. Somebody called me to follow, I followed, thinking aloud without hearing the sound.
This is so bizarre.
Then all the planets fell to dust, lonely departing after
But like in the
us.
least bizarre way.
Long but forgotten, oh Lord, in every element of life, love camouflaging under strife, or other matters, minds over matters, let there be more.
Like this particular vocal melody we were just in. Oh, even this one. Very much a type of melody we found in indie rock and pop rock in the late 2000s. So there's elements of modern composition in here, but a lot of it is put on the foundation of something that's much older.
Why did fire erupt in lands arrive? Why did murderous
And this reminds me of something a prog band would do, like Yes, Crimson, King Crimson, Floyd.
Why was any and everything alive?
Ooh, that last bass note. Alright, I think that's going to move into the next one, so I vaguely remember comments saying everything moves into one another, but again, I'm trying to remember comments from a while ago. So yeah, like I was talking about, there's melodies in here that feel modern for the time. This was 2012 when this came out. And there's one specific pop artist, and I can't think of his name. I can hear the song, something about dancing with fireflies beneath the trees or something. Anyways, I like this melody feels so similar to that one. And that, I mean, this the type of melody I pointed out here. It's just, to me, it is the indie pop sound of the late 2000s, early 2010s. A lot of artists were utilizing stuff similar, very bright, very positive, very majory. But it's also paired against production styles of much older eras. The entire opening track, Introduction to the Snow, which immediately makes me think of radio static or television static. It's the white and black snow that would appear when you don't have a signal coming into the TV. And yeah, we have an older technology there, and then also the older technology production wise. Everything's very compressed. It sounds like it's coming out of radios from like the 50s. And then, of course, we have the purely a cappella middle quarter from like the halfway point to the final quarter of the track, which was very reminiscent of a lot of the a cappella music coming out of the music scene in the, was it the 50s when the musicians went on strike? And so a bunch of record labels got vocalists because vocals weren't instruments for some reason. And so we had a lot of a cappella music coming out around the time, utilizing chords much like this. There's so many things pulling back to this older era, and yet the music doesn't feel old. Many of the compositional choices are a bit more modern, although it does harken back to a lot of the positivity of the older music. It almost feels anachronistic, which is a word that describes something that's really difficult to place. No, anachronistic means it's outside of its time, right? Do we have a word for something that's difficult to place in time? I don't think that's anachronistic. Anachronistic is when it's outside of the time it's supposed to be. But yeah, this feels like it could belong in a lot of places. I think some of the more modern elements certainly betrays it and makes it feel like it could only have been done in the future. Otherwise, it would just be exceptionally before its time. We're talking like 60 years before its time. But it's all over the place. It's difficult for me to get a grasp on, not even just categorically, but to understand what it's trying to do, because it's kind of trying to do a lot of things. But here's the fun part. All these different ideas it pulls together into something cohesive. Both of these tracks moving into each other, so I'm just going to kind of approach it as a single idea here. It works. There's nothing in here that feels out of place. It isn't like other experimental music that's closer to the avant-garde camp of experimentation, where there's a disjointedness to it. Maybe everybody's playing in different time signatures or different keys. We have disjointedness of harmony. Maybe there's a disjointedness of ideas, something like Early Between the Buried and Me, where every section is its own unique thing, and sometimes you just throw a hoedown in the middle of a metal track. This is experimental in a way that finds the common ground between all of it and hyper focuses on it. It's an eclectic group of sounds, but they do all meet in the middle of this four-circle Venn diagram, and that is where the tracks exist. There is a general positivity to all of these sounds, and regardless of if the melody and harmony is more modern or more classic, it's still a positive feeling. And so we can gently shift between these two modes without much issue, because they're both attempting to do the same thing, to paint a feeling and an emotion of brightness, of positive, of joy. There's an interesting darkness though to it, and I don't know where it comes from. Certainly melodically and harmonically, every bit of this is bright and positive. Maybe there is a single note or a bar that introduces some tension. You need that for a good chord progression, but I wouldn't say that there was any part of the composition that was dark. Even any of the flittering sounds, our foundational sounds, ornamental stuff, all of it was to provoke a feeling of warmth and curiosity, joy, happiness. But I still felt a darkness in here, and I don't know where it came from. My first guess is production. Introduction to the Snow is a tighter production. It's very compressed. It's because it's trying to emulate older speakers. I don't know if that really feels dark, though. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Do you feel anything dark in these opening two tracks? And if so, do you know where you feel it from? For all I know, it's something that'll pass. Maybe it's just part of the acclimation process of getting used to the sound. It's familiar, but it's fresh, and I love that. I wonder if the whole album's going to be like this, though. Speaking about production, real quick, yeah, dude, that opening drum beat in Isle Unto Thyself, there is no, that felt like watching TV go from black and white to color for the first time. Just the sonic shift from that 50s type of old-timey radio compression to a modern clarity to the production. Wow. That was certainly a feeling. Now, I do have some interesting relationships to these sounds. When he's not using that indie pop melody that I pointed out, there's a different melodic language he's using. Still bright, colorful, but the only other place I've really heard it is in an animated show called Steven Universe. which I think came out after this, maybe around the same time. I don't know. Whatever influence Joe had to leaning into these melodies is the same one that whoever wrote the music for Steven Universe also was inspired by. Not a specific artist, but a genre, a style of music. I've always wanted to figure out where Steven Universe's music came from, inspiration wise, what era, what type of music, because it's a very peculiar theatrical type of pop melody writing that I've always wanted more of, but it's a hard thing to search for, right? It's not like I have a genre here. I can say, oh, I need more black metal and just go search for that and find stuff. No, it's a very specific harmonic flavor of pop writing, and we just don't classify genre that way. But I'm finding it here, which is really cool. It's giving me nostalgia for this sound, and I'm glad I've heard this. I don't know if it's something that's going to be explored throughout this whole thing. As it stands, we're 2 tracks in, and we've heard 3 different types of harmonic writing for melody. So, for all I know, the rest of the album's going to keep moving in that direction, and we're going to continue to explore new harmonic devices. But I hope more of the album has this. And also, if anybody knows more music written like that, just toss it my way. This might be the best chance I have at oh, snap. So we have this channel on Discord where you can say, hey, I like this music. Can you recommend me some more like it? And we have a lot of knowledgeable people in the server, and I don't think I've ever seen a request ever come up empty-handed with no answers to it. So I don't know why I never thought about that, but I should probably drop some links in there. Also, I've probably already done that by now. But still, post any recommendations in the comments. I will definitely be listening to them. But here's the other thing. Remember I mentioned, I think it was the chorus, there's this twinkling synth thing going on in the background. And what's really odd is that to me, that reminds me of a lot of the ornamental background music that happens in the earlier Kirby video games. And I'm really trying to figure out where the intersection of all this is. I'd love to have a sit down with Joe and just I don't even care about the lyrics. I mean, maybe I will by the end, but like he doesn't want to explain the lyrics and the story of this. I'm cool with that. I just want some music info. Tell me how you made this. Tell me what your inspirations were, where you came up with ideas, what kind of music you listened to in the past, whether attentively or unattentively. When it comes to theme music, whether that's video games or film or TV, we're not actively listening to it. It's played all the time. And so you just subconsciously take it in. Is there anything else I wanted to touch on here? This is a smorgasbord of sounds, and I'm really off kilter here after our opening 5 minutes or so. I think I need another track before I can really start digging into anything analytically. But I will say that I'm rather impressed with it so far. Both with its eclectic use of sounds that all sort of fit in the same feeling but not the same mold, and the way that they're all smashed together into something that feels right. It's a composite sound, but nothing feels out of place. It all feels natural. It feels like these sounds should have always been played together. And I find that to be really impressive. The production is great, the melodies are catchy, and I love all the little ornamental bits. It is, at least so far, an album that says we create a foundation, we create a melody, but we don't stop there. We need to fill out the space. There's always something around every corner. It feels like this album's going to go by so fast. I know there's two longer tracks on here, but there's a lot of shorter ones. In fact, our next one's only 2.5. We have a series of threes after that, and then a six, and then another 2.5, and a four, and a three, and then a seven. I feel like this album's just going to fly by because this opening 5 minutes, it was nonstop. Not only is it only 5 minutes and we're already two tracks down, which is pretty good for most of the albums we get on this channel, but also the ideas just kept moving. There's no stagnancy to any of this. By the time I start to figure something out and I want to say something, hey, did you hear this? We're moving on to something else. And it feels like a flurry, a whirlwind of events. I'm good with that. I'm enjoying myself casually, but it makes it very difficult to latch on to anything and digest it and analyze it. So I guess we'll see how the album goes, but I could do with a little bit of slowing down in the pace for the sake of the video. I think as an artwork, it's paced fine. It's evading my ability to latch onto anything. It's a bit too squirmy. Let's take our first futile stab at the lyrics and see what's going on there. We're off to a perplexing start. Introduction to the snow. I knew I was in for a treat when every single line has its own annotation on Genius, which is impressive. Usually, a group will be annotated to say that, this verse, this stanza is about this, and then the annotation might talk about specific words or phrases, but very rarely are songs annotated line by line. Now, I haven't read every annotation. We'll get to that in a second. The verse, it's not even a line. It just says, this is the verse section. It just says verse, right? That's annotated. It says, incidentally, the piano intro to this song resembles the Game Over theme from Final Fantasy VII. It's possible me hearing some Kirby in here is not completely unfounded. Again, I'd love to ask Joe where he got some of his inspiration from, what he's listened to in the past, but I wonder if we'll continue to hear stuff like that throughout. Now, I am being a little spoiled here, which is one reason I'm not a huge fan of the annotations, but since I'm a bit weaker at lyrics, I tend to use them as a crutch anyways. It says that this album can be thought of as one continuous show with repeated themes and motifs. Well, I didn't get to learn that on my own. I am going to keep my ear to the ground and see if I can't find any musical ones throughout the album. Also, if it's thought of as one continuous show, the idea of starting with static of the TV, which is something even I do when we watch YouTube videos. I have a music video to play or whatever, and the little screen comes down, and I have the static that comes in before the video starts. Like, yes, that's how old-timey TVs sort of worked if you didn't have the input coming in. So I'm glad to see that I'm sort of on the right track with that concept of snow. Although it could also be literal snow, which is not talked about at all in the lyrics. So there's that. Now, the first bit of annotation speaks about the loneliness of the line. It says, alone at the edge of a universe, humming a tune. I'm curious if the person alone is humming the tune or if the universe is humming the tune. The annotator does not mention this at all. It is the first thing I noticed. It is written in an interesting way. It doesn't say humming a tune at the edge of the universe. Alone at the edge of a universe humming a tune. There's no comma to really indicate who's doing the humming. The next line says, with sparkling crystal souls aglow. And the annotation says, welcome to this album. This is the kind of ambiguous language ahead that leads to the album's many interpretations. Kind of a cheeky way to start that annotation. But I think this is where I stopped reading the annotations. If even the fandom isn't too sure what it's about because it is written so ambiguously, should I rely on that? Or should I attempt to put my own spin on things? I've decided on the latter. Unfortunately, I feel like I'm going to miss out on interesting details, such as the possibility of including a bit of a game over theme from a video game, but I'm not too sure if just regurgitating other people's thoughts, which might not even be accurate, is the best way to go about doing this, given it's open to interpretation. So let's interpret it. It says, alone at the edge of a universe, humming a tune, with sparkling crystals, souls aglow, a part of thee, in the key of what we know to be every part, without me, knows only two can make it light, you'll live forever tonight. Now I find this really interesting. It says, knows only two can make it light. So the part of me, that is every part that isn't me, which is a baffling statement to make, says that only two people can make it light. Sorry, only two can make it light. Knowing that this is about the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers, that the two eyes in Hawaii Part 2 are supposed to represent them, the concept of two here can't be overlooked. I don't have anything to go on to what specifically we're talking about. I think in most contexts, only two can make it light would be a romantic gesture. It could also be one of society. In order for the passing of knowledge, for humanity to light up, to grow, to shine brighter, you need two people to pass the knowledge between. It says, you'll live forever tonight, which once again sort of leads into another person. Two can make it light. I'm already here. You'll live forever. Here's our two people. It is very cryptic, though. Why is he at the edge of a universe? What is that representing? Is the universe humming? I think every universe hums. We just can't hear it. But see, I am curious now. As far as I remember, no one brought up the Twin Towers at all when we checked out the final track off this album as an isolated reaction. Everyone brought up a love story. And that's what this feels like. Being alone at the edge of the universe, having done everything. Just out here humming a tune. Nothing more to do. And then there's you. And that's how this story starts. At least that's how it feels like to me. Now see, here I begin to question the validity of the World Trading Center musical concept, especially since Joe mentions that this album isn't necessarily that, but that the project as a whole is about that. But this is also the only thing they've ever released. So, like, there really isn't a separation between there, is it? Maybe if you eventually make more music under this moniker, yeah, then you can call the project something different than one of your albums. But right now, they're synonymous. Because this is 100% straightforward a love song. A love and loss song. The verse says, "You were an isle unto thyself. You had a heart you hadn't felt. Why would it hurt me? Or was it even real? It was the night we had to part. We were afraid to miss the start. What did it matter? Why would it matter? And could we heal?" So it says we were afraid to miss the start. It almost seems like they jumped into the relationship too early, afraid that if they waited too long, they wouldn't be able to see what was going on. But eventually it had to end. And our narrator, our vocalist here, the character, I should say, not the vocals. I don't know if this is based on anything in Joe's life. The character, though, was hurt by it. The chorus says, "Blinding, shining star, you won't see so far. Know what can't be shown, feel what can't be known." And I find this interesting. The shining star can't see very far. It's blinded itself, something that can blind others. But it's given a directive to go outside the bounds of what's expected, to know what you can't see, and to feel what you can't know. Now, I did look at one annotation here because I'm curious about the times they annotate the name of the section. So I did look at the Bridge 1 annotation, and it says, "Notably, this section is sung in a different voice from the rest of the song." It says meant to denote a different character. If that's true, yes, 100%. I talk about that all the time. If you're going to have multiple characters on an album, voice them differently. I don't think the other way is wrong. I just find it super confusing. Even after I've listened to it, hundreds of times, even if I know the story and what sections are supposed to be from what character, it just makes more sense to me to have multiple voices on it. And I completely forgot about that. There is, I think, a female vocalist on this track. Specifically, our bridge says, "I was a victim of magic, Apollo. Catching my breath as I bled on the ground, someone called me to follow, so I followed, thinking aloud without hearing the sound." Yeah, this is definitely one of the more cryptic stanzas in here. What does any of this mean? A victim of magic. My first thought would be love, which I think this is fantastic. If love can be magical, but to say that you're a victim of magic means that it was done to you without your consent, which is kind of what falling in love is. Like, you don't really plan on it. Chemicals just start moving around in your body, and all of a sudden you're attracted to somebody. You can't help that. You didn't ask for it. And if it's something that ends up hurting you, you didn't ask for that pain. You didn't ask for the events to lead up to it. Yeah, I can kind of see that angle, if that's where they're going. I don't know where Apollo comes into this, though. It says, "I caught my breath as I bled on the ground, and someone called me to follow, so I did, thinking aloud without hearing the sound." I don't know. We flip back to Joe, though. He says, "Then all the planets fell to dust, lonely, departing after us, gone, not forgotten, long, but forgotten old lore. In every element of life, love camouflaging under strife, or other matters, mind over matters, let there be more." Now, this section begins an idea that I've been thinking about, which is sometimes phrases don't have meaning in this album. They're there for the poetic feeling of it. Love camouflaging under strife or other matters. Mind over matters. I can't really find a reason for that particularly, but it works well as a nice turning of the original phrase into an adage. It helps the flow of this section. But again, it's about loss. We had to depart from one another, and so the planets did too. That universe I was standing at the edge of, it's also falling apart. The outro says, "Why did fire erupted lands arrive? Why did murderous animals survive? Why did we deserve to be revived? Why was any and everything alive?" To me, this is a bunch of questions asking about the entropy of the universe. Why did any of this happen? There's no answer to any of it. You can apply a religious element to it if you'd like. You could apply a supernatural element to it if you'd like. There's scientific reasons for at least, the volcanic elements of it. But the big question is, why are we here? And I think that's a question a lot of people, especially more philosophical people, tend to ask. And that's what all four of these do in one sense or another, or if nothing else, lead into that thought. And assuming that the song is about heartbreak, I guess that kind of works. You can feel these intense feelings that you don't want to. Once again, I didn't ask for any of this. Why is it happening to me? Is the description that works for both love and heartbreak and life in general. Especially if at that moment you're feeling a lot of negativity in your life. Let's keep this train rolling. The next track is only 2.5 minutes long. I don't know if we're going to stop after it. I guess it really depends on how much is going on in there and if I've come up with any thoughts. It's a short track. Usually I'd push right by it, but we're also at the beginning of the album and I still have a lot of thoughts formulating about what I'm hearing. So we'll play it by ear. Let's get into Black Rainbows, which is just... what? Okay, what? And this kind of reminds me of like the 90s industrial scene as far as like the percussive instruments. Oh, okay, just throw some of that in there.
I see the praised rays, you see me smile. We know the joy beyond above has been here a while. I draw the rainbows, you draw them near, and lo, the hues arranged to show it's perfectly clear. Stella upon your
All right. Yeah, that probably goes into the next track. No, I had a revelation here. So, the opening two tracks, I bring up concepts of 50s pop, a cappella during the strike, modern pop. I forgot to bring up one, which was prog rock. We heard a little bit of stuff that I mentioned. I could hear a band like Pink Floyd, some sounds that they would utilize in Isle Unto Thyself, which now I'm thinking that like the production of all this, I need to start calling into question and its relationships to the lyrics and stuff like that, but I don't know I'm going to be able to pick up on enough information to dive into that, but it certainly seems like something I should be talking about. But like here's this is an electronic album. And I know that's like a bizarre statement to make, but it is, or at least I think that's the nearest genre for describing the foundation of this. Okay, so at this point you're probably thinking, Brian, I don't hear anything digital in here at all. Where are you going with this? Bear with me. So, when it comes to composition, genres tend to sit within boxes. Different genres tend to sound different than other genres because they're using different harmonies, chords, melodies, all sorts of things that define them on a compositional level. Even if, well, like we checked out earlier this week with, was it Deadly Carnage? Even if you take the sounds of black metal outside of the black metal production and the black metal production, the sounds of it, the timbre of the instruments, the way that it's mixed, you can still feel that black metaliness in the composition. There's something very specific about the notes, how they're played, the relationships between notes, rhythmically and pitch wise. Like all of this comes to form genre. It's something that's very much how we define what music is by what the music is doing. These three songs have been all over the place. There's no consistency to the composition. I talked about in the first three songs, we already had three different vocal melody techniques going on that evoked widely different eras of music. There is no compositional consistency going on, and Black Rainbows leaned into that even harder. This song looked at a completely different genre of music. Once again, smashing a melodic flow on top of a vibe that I've never heard before. Do you know what kind of music does that? Well, a lot of experimental music, but also a lot of electronic. There's something else that this music is hyper focused on, and that's production. The production of our opening track, Introduction to the Snow, is different than the production for Isle Unto Thyself. It's different than the production for Black Rainbows. They're all hyper focused on sounding a specific way. Some of that does come from the composition itself, choosing the right chord progressions for the song, but a lot of it comes from the instruments, the effects put on the instruments, the layering that is put on the instruments. This is stuff that I tend to look for in electronic music more so than anything else. That is where most of my disconnect has been coming from, I think. It's eclectic in one way, but expected in another, and I couldn't figure out why. Why was all of this working together? It's the production. When you have the lead vocalist in Black Rainbows sing a track and the first full four syllables are produced one way and the fifth syllable is produced a completely different way with a different effect stack on it, That is not something most genres attempted to do, but it is something electronic does. Now, that isn't to say that there's electronic sounds in here. We do have a synth in a couple of places. We have that synthy organ thing going on in Isle Unto Thyself. But for the most part, a lot of the instruments feel acoustic or real. There's a lot of bells in here. I've heard marimba and xylophone. We've had piano. Um, we have drum kit. We have some hand drums, a lot of vocal work. I don't think anything in here is something that feels like it could only exist in a digital landscape. But the lens through which the song is envisioned and executed on is one of an electronic artist. At least that's what I'm getting from our opening 7 minutes here. I know it's not a lot of time to work with. I might be extrapolating a bit too heavily here, and the data may not stand under that pressure, but as of right now, I see this pattern forming where I had not seen any patterns previously, so I gotta latch on to it because it's the only thing I feel like I got at the moment. And it is blowing my mind because it puts things into perspective. I'm approaching this closer to how we've approached coil in the past. How I typically go into any Aphex Twin or Autechre reaction, where I kind of have a general idea of what it's going to do compositionally, but I have no idea what it's going to sound like. And that's how I feel like I need to go into each of these songs. Generally, I think there's a vibe I can expect, but how that vibe is executed, how it's delivered to my ears, what kind of colors it's going to be presented with, that's where the magic comes from. And that also shifts not from track to track, but moment to moment. Now, I brought up effects. There's a lot of effects going out through all these tracks. I can't point to them all, but there's one that's standing out to me. We heard it a little bit in track 2 and a lot of it in track 3. It's the psychedelic angle, whether that's heavy reverb, heavy echo, particular type of layering. There are some vocal harmonies in here that might have been quintuple tracked, where the vocalist just recorded all 5 harmonies on it, but also feels so perfectly done that it could just be pitch corrected or pitch shifted in this case. You recorded this one line. I'm going to copy paste it 5 times and then change the pitch on each of those, which is also something an electronic artist would do. So, I might be on something here. It's there's just so many things in here that have a psychedelic edge to it. And I've already brought up Pink Floyd, and Isle Unto Thyself, for more of its psychedelic sounds that I feel were borrowed for that track. I'm curious how much of the progressive psychedelic era of the 70s is going to continue to weigh down on this album. It gives it all a very dreamlike feel. And have you guys really looked at this album art? I know this isn't exceptionally big, but like, we have a transparent. I always have to think that through. One of them's all the way clear, one of them's halfway clear. And then I usually think about window transparency in Windows in operating systems. Anyways, so we have transparent staircase that curves from off screen to off screen, water, 2 palm trees growing in the water, a shark, a whale, in the left background, next to the moon is, oh, some I actually just read a comment on this week. I think the person dropped it on like Monday or Tuesday, and they're like, it's an anglerfish, and the moon is their light. And I was really happy I saw Finding Nemo because I don't think I would have known what an anglerfish was without that. Marine life is certainly not an expertise of mine. You're gonna need to show me pictures, not just words with this. But no, I actually had that one. So like, yeah, but like otherwise it still just looks like a demon face. Some sort of H.R. Geiger alien type thing going on next to a moon that's just like faded into the sky. And what's going on in the top left? I haven't quite figured that out. The starry sky seems to bend and curve to reveal something behind it that's abstract. It just looks like shapes, triangles cut out of one background, allowing us to see something underneath, but none of it's making any sense. At the end of the day, it's a collage of pictures with varying amounts of transparency to make them feel like they're all connected. I'm well versed in this. If you go to my compositions channel, you'll find a lot of this. It's how I make many of the backgrounds for my music videos. They're not really music videos, but you put something on YouTube, they want a visual component to it. So I just grab a bunch of pictures and I start compositing them on top of each other, altering transparency levels, utilizing different kinds of blending techniques, and I come up with composite shots like this. And you know what? They make about as much sense as this does. I'm curious if there's more to it though. But I brought this up because the music also feels like composite music to me. It is a lot of things from different eras of music and different types of production and composition, all brought together and smoothed out. Levels of transparency applied so that they don't feel out of place. They feel like they all belong to the same picture, even if you start to scrutinize it, you feel how disparate it is. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, but on a casual glance at the picture or a casual listen to the song, it all flows well enough and it's all focusing on the same thing. As I mentioned, that four circle Venn diagram that this album fits right in the middle of. Every influence, Joe just finds the perfect elements of it that are going to match up with the other parts of the Venn diagram and says, this is what the song is going to be. And so we end up with something like Black Rainbows, where it feels like you're chilling on a beach with some happy, positive vibes off on the side, and then somebody singing psychedelic 60s style harmonies and echo and delay next to it. And you're like, one of these, not like the other. But in when you listen to it, it's not bad, it's not wrong, it fits, but it shouldn't. And like, I find this to be very interesting because I would love to write music like this. It is sitting on this line between total cohesion and completely falling apart in a way that, depending on how closely you scrutinize it, you're going to find evidence for both sides present. That blows my mind. How does that work? How is this so terribly constructed that I could say this is why everything feels disparate, and yet in the moment, it's so fluid? I don't know. It's honestly boggling me, and I flabbergasted. I don't have words for it. It's not. I know I said it's terribly put together. That was a bit of an overstatement, but it is very disparate if I decide to have a magnifying glass of any power put over this sonically as I listen to it, that metaphor fall apart real quick. I'm like, this shouldn't work. And there are elements where I'm like, yeah, this kind of doesn't work. But if I just shut my brain off, it's gorgeous. It is. How do you simultaneously make something disparate and cohesive? It logically can't be done, and yet here we have it. All right, lyrics. So this is pretty cool. The album is called Hawaii Part 2. We do have some Hawaiian musical vibes in here. There's also Hawaiian lyrics. Granted, it's just a few words repeated over and over, but it's the colors of the rainbow. Eventually, the words stop being the colors of the rainbow and is just the word for black repeated over and over and over. On top of this, somebody sings, "Do we remember connected rainbows?" That was a really interesting line. What is a connected rainbow? We'll touch on that in a second. There's 2 verses, 8 lines total. That's the whole song. It says, "I see the praised rays. You see me smile. We know the joy beyond above has been here a while. I draw the rainbows, you draw them near, and lo, the hues arranged to show it's perfectly clear." It's about 2 people drawing rainbows together and experiencing joy while looking at them, and knowing that that joy has been here for some time. These rainbows could be themselves. It says, "I draw rainbows and you draw them near." So we're both drawing rainbows here. Do you remember the connected rainbows? Do you remember when these were aligned? That's a terrible rainbow. There we go. Got some arches going up in here. I think the idea is generally that the rainbows represent each of the people, and I don't know. When they're connected, it was when they were together, and now that they're not connected, now that it has to be remembered, this is after they've split, which is what we just explored in the last track. I'm curious where the black rainbow comes in. Because that phrase doesn't pop up anywhere. The word black is repeated a lot in the Hawaiian sections, but there is nothing in here that even mentions a black rainbow. There is one other concept, the Stella Octangula, which is an 8-pointed star. It's Latin for it. I don't know what that has to do with anything, though. it just kind of pops up twice. I'm like, okay, we got the 8-pointed star in here. That's it. I really think it's just a song about remembering the times when we were together. Maybe there's more to it, but the positive, happy, carefree, worry-less vibes kind of lean into that. Remember when things were good? So we got this chill music to go along with it. Yeah, I guess that one's it. Moving on to track 4 of 11. We're an hour in, so we're looking to be on pace. Listen to 3 songs in an hour. Oh, what? Oh, I pushed the wrong button. That's why. I was like, why is Genius showing up? But yeah, we're over on Spotify. We don't need the YouTube thing. Alright, next track is called White Ball, which I assume is the moon, but maybe not. Honestly, I think Joe could go in any direction. Oh, also, This whole time, I've been thinking, why do I know that name? Joe Hawley. That's so familiar. And I went and looked up Tally Hall, and Joe Hawley hasn't done anything else. Just Tally Hall, and I think a couple other projects. All music though, all stuff I've never heard of. Like, why is his name? Noah Hawley is who I've been thinking of this whole time. He's the showrunner for stuff like Fargo, and he did something else that's over, and I can't think of. Oh, Legion. Yeah, he's nothing to do with Joe Hawley, I suppose. I don't know. Maybe I'll look up later if they're related. All right. Next up is White Ball. Let's check it out.
Drift aloft in some effortless place, bound by delicate tread.
Once again, heavy compression on the vocals, but we have a string section giving us our chords this time.
Where one game is designed, something's elegant fine, so the program
Yeah. Great falsetto. Full bodied, no airiness to it at all. Really leaned into and projected.
Check it out.
What?
Fate decides how these columns align, birth by chance or benign. Every moment, robots, tango circles in space, round the already dead, hung by stairs.
Ooh, the tension. Okay.
On and on, the awakening rise. Will they slumber of ethereal sight?
Yeah, beautiful.
Today is renewed, is reborn. Each day I am new, I am yours. So please dismiss what they claim about this, being in vain to explain how expressed with a kiss, taking passionate steps for suspending abyss. Such impossible bliss, 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 such impossible
All right. One thing I'm quickly discovering is that this is definitely something that should just be listened to in one go. I mean, it is only 42 minutes long. It is not a lengthy album. And I'm doing a disservice to myself breaking it up after every track or so. I think even if I listened to 2 or 3 tracks straight, I'd still be doing a disservice because it really feels like it should be taken in as a whole work. It'd be like if I paused the film every couple of scenes to dissect it. Like, yeah, you can certainly gain an understanding of what the film's doing, but you're going to be missing out on the experience. Which is why, usually, outside of the reaction area of YouTube, most people will watch something and then talk about it. This is where the whole video essay thing comes in. There is something about taking it in as a whole work that, for specific art like this, is just so different from picking it apart moment to moment. But I'm not going to be able to remember 42 minutes of all sorts of bonkers changes and different ideas. So that's probably the best way to go about it, which is why I do it this way. But I do understand and appreciate this is not the way to get a first listen done for this album. Some albums, sure. Not this one. We have a brand new sound here. Not only do we bring in new instrumentation, we have the piano and we have the string section, we also bring in new composition, this one leaning a bit more towards a classical harmonic idea. And what I find fascinating is not just that Joe can write all these different musical ideas, that he is well versed enough to create iterative works in so many different styles, and also to smash them together to create compound iterative works, which would that be innovation at that point? I don't know. Regardless, he can also sing within all these styles. He has primarily his one type of delivery. He has sounded like Joe this whole time, but he is a great enough singer that he can absolutely sing all the notes needed for all these. And that is something. I don't know if a lot of people think about that. You either think you're a good singer or you're not. But different types of music require different intervals, both in how you're going to move along your melody and also what sort of note intervals tend to be utilized in that genre. A good singer, primarily one who went to singing school, has an academic background in singing, is going to be trained to sing notes. So you just give them sheet music and they'll be able to sing whatever's in front of them. But I feel like more prominently in autodidactic vocalists who have basically learned to sing because they joined a band and they're the singer in the band. They're the one who could sing the best out of the group. They end up finding that it's easiest to sing within their range, their style, their feel. And it's because they build a lot of muscle memories for specific notes, especially bands once we enter the rock and metal realm, where harmonically they don't venture out very commonly harmonically. So they end up having to play within the same keys for a lot of their songs, and the vocalist gets really good at singing within those keys, but doesn't have any practice singing outside of them. Their ability to target specific notes that they don't sing very often is not as strong. This tells me, if nothing else, that Joe is a really great singer. He can sing within all these styles, and it sounds relatively great, and the pitches are all absolutely perfect. And that gives me a lot of respect for him on a lot of levels. Composer and producer, presumably. Do we have a thing in here? Who produced this stuff? Oh, Ross Fetterman. Okay, so Joe did not do the production, but he did write the songs and play them. All right. But yeah, so that's still just stunning to have all this knowledge and ability needed to create this and then to create it, to execute on those ideas. Now I'm beginning to get a feel for the way that these songs are composed. All the songs we've listened to so far are written in a very pop style of way. And when I say pop, I probably should replace that with popular or mainstream style of way. Almost everything instrumentally is foundational. It sets the mood, it gives you your key or your chord progression, you get the emotion from it, some atmospheric stuff, and occasionally some ornamental ideas that sort of spruce the place up a little bit. There is zero melody really coming out of any of the instrumentation, though. And so the music acts as a foundation, a jumping off board for the vocals. The vocals deliver the story, they deliver the melody. They also deliver harmony and chords because the vocals needed more pressure put on them, I suppose. There's a ton of vocal harmonies in all the tracks we've listened to so far. And this last track more so because we have our two vocalists singing together most of it. And that's how a lot of the songs are built. It's why I really haven't had a lot to talk about on the compositional side, and I'm glad I've picked this up a bit earlier. I can look for changes, variations in this approach as we go forward. But each song tends to be, here's some chords, here's a beat that we're going to put on top of it. The beats have been really simple. The percussive element has been fairly non-existent as far as complexity goes. It's there to be a human metronome, occasionally being a little bit groovier if the vibe fits that, such as with this one and Black Rainbows. They needed a little bit of that syncopation in it to create that laid backness. But yeah, aside from that, there's just very minimal percussion work here. Everything is harmonic, building atmosphere through chords, building atmosphere through letting us know what the key is, or through timbre, textures, what instruments are chosen. The composition is fairly simple, layered, but simple. A lot of the complexity comes through the emotional element, and as I mentioned, that's the different chords they're choosing, the colors of the instruments that they're choosing, the melodies that they're putting in the vocals. But most of it is set dressing for the vocalist. In a lot of ways, this feels like a musical or any play in general, where the stage is there to facilitate the actors. The instruments are here to facilitate our vocalists. They're the ones telling us our story. They're the ones who are telling us the tale through language and also through their emotion. The production is there to set the scene. The instruments are there to tell us how to feel about the song, not to really give us musical components, musical depth. Let me put it that way, because they absolutely are doing things. Foundation, atmosphere, chords, these are all very important. And there are some ornamental ideas that I think do elevate the tracks. White Ball, I felt like they were a bit more okay. It was nice to have that space filled out, but Isle Unto Thyself, some of those moving parts in the background, the twinkling stuff, absolutely sells this idea of not just filling out the sound, but leading into some of the vibes and feelings of the loneliness in that track, of being alone and then finding someone else and then finding out you got to split up anyways. It ends. There's a lot of loneliness going on in that track, and I think looking out into the stars and the twinkling of it all also calls back to Introduction to the Snow. So this is probably stuff I should have talked about in Isle Unto Thyself, but yeah, the ornamental ideas help sell the story, but I haven't really felt that in any of the other tracks so far. It's all been set dressing, which isn't a bad thing. I tend to like my instruments to do a little bit more, but I mean, every production, whether it's a film or a play or an album, there's small parts to it. and they're just as important to everything else. And this album just happens to be made up of a lot of small parts. Small parts holding up two really big parts, the vocals. Speaking of which, let's dive into them and see what the vocalists were singing about this time. So here's something real neat. Every other track has been sung by Joe Hawley and Matty Diaz. Those have been our two vocalists from the beginning. Not on this song. Which, I just spent a while praising Joe for his ability to transform his voice between ideas, and he didn't even sing on this song. I don't think I need to retract those statements, but I do have to say that the last song can't be indicative of that praise. I may have to revisit that towards the end of the track, but Joe has still showcased quite a bit of range on this album, even if we don't include the classical-esque sounds of White Ball. However, Zubin Seji, which is another member of Tally Hall, and Stephanie Koenig end up being the vocalists on this track. That was the big mind blow right there. I was not expecting vocal shifts. And I had mentioned there was a little bit of difference in the male delivery, but I still kind of figured that was Joe for some reason. This song is about two people metaphorically being somewhere that's too good to be true. Could be a dream sequence. It could just be a hyper-visualized component of their relationship. And once again, we are on the fourth song about lovers. There's probably like a third layer of metaphor onto this where it could be about the Twin Towers and 9/11 and coping with loss. I mean, coping with loss is an element of this track. Of this album so far. But it really seems like a stretch at this point. Anyways, we have two people in love. It says they drift aloft in some effortless place. Later on describes this as being a place where air dissolves, where columns are aligned. There's a staircase, a circle staircase that goes up, which immediately makes me think of the album art. We also have White Ball, which I thought was about the moon, which is on the album art. So I'm curious if a lot of these themes... Well, we also have the palm trees, which kind of remind me of... Does Hawaii have palm trees? I think they do. Which would be a bit of black rainbows. I'm curious if the album art isn't actually a composite picture full of references to the album itself, not supposed to represent any one idea, but have a little bit of everything in it. A bit more of a collage idea, just less collagey, more composite-y. It is a place where they sleep every night and are renewed and reborn the next day. The end of the song calls this an impossible bliss. We'll return to that. I have some thoughts there, but they're definitely in a place that is bright and positive and happy and too good to be true. It seems that every day they dance. It says that they are bound by a delicate dread, though. I find that interesting. Speaks about a game being designed. Or at least that's how this program goes. The idea that there is something larger at work being run by someone bigger than them. Verse 2 introduced this. Maybe it's fate who decides. Or maybe it's some benign thing. I kind of read that as something a bit more circumstantial, coincidental. He says, but for every moment there are marble gods who tango circles in space around the already dead. That's an image. That is an image. Now, what's really cool here, and I want to move into this last bit because I don't really have any thoughts on anything else. There's the spoken word parts. I think that's just to give the feeling of being at a party, being at a ball. The final two stanzas. So please dismiss what they claim about this being in vain to explain how expressed with a kiss taking passionate steps floor suspending abyss such impossible bliss. I can't believe I'm bringing up Disney 2 album reviews in a row, but this is very typical way to end a Disney track. Especially one that is about something on the verge of ending. You have a repeated rhyme. Dismiss, this, kiss, bliss, abyss. And the music loops over and over and over on a leading tone, which is what we got here too. It's what creates this rising tension because our brains expect the resolving chord and we don't get it. We don't even get a resolution to our rhyme scheme. It just keeps rhyming and rhyming and rhyming. There's no pattern to it. There's no end. It's being stuck in a loop. This is utilized not just in Disney. It's actually a very typical musical device. You can hear it in a lot of musical theater, but I hear it in Disney stuff. That's sort of where I kind of connect with it. But it's this concept of being stuck in a loop. And interestingly enough, once they say that they're in such impossible bliss, that line gets repeated 6 times. We still lacking the harmonic and emotional resolution to the writing. If I remember right, we also had a rising intensity. I don't remember if it was more layers or just more volume or what was going on there. But just musically, there's this building tension and you want it to quit and it just doesn't. I find this interesting not just because there's this tension in this seemingly impossible area of pure positivity, but that this line, such impossible bliss, almost gets distorted after the 5th and 6th time saying it. The first time makes it feel like this is great. How things are expressed with a kiss. We take passionate steps. The floor. Suspending abyss. That's a little dark. But it's such an impossible bliss. This is so good. It's such an impossible bliss. It's such an impossible bliss. And the more times you say it, the more twisted it gets. It starts off just talking about how great this place is. It's so good it should be impossible. Oh, it's so good that it should be impossible. And I think it begins to take a darker turn towards the end of it. Now the next track is called Murders. So we'll see what goes on there, but I think that this song is primarily about like the puppy dog love portion of a relationship, the honeymoon section of it. It's the opening few days or weeks or months where everything just works. You wake up every day wanting to be with this other person. They're the light of your life. Every day is just impossible bliss. Try to spend every moment with them that you can. Being around them is intoxicating. You don't want to be without them. Work days or school days, whatever you're doing, they just feel like they take even longer now. It's so much time till you get to see your sweetheart. But it doesn't last forever. And I think that's what the song's aiming at. I did it again. Come on, Bryan, stop hitting the YouTube button. Why does that still say Black Rainbows? All right, fix that. Let's push forward. Check out Murders. We also have a few seconds left on White Ball. So, let's go. They trained me to think everything was connected.
Looking to see the trees, but none were there. He found a girl, she found the Earl King. They were in the white wood, gambling out to picnic. In the light, leaves broke above, then fell below. I was in the middle ground, looking to find the flowers in the garden, wearying of the hate me not. Wait, they forgot. Whoa, oh, the rot. Deeper in they crept, oblivious of the bears and darker.
26-beat phrase?
How did they dare? I was in the middle ground, looking to find the fountain of infinite mirror. Tree falling, no one would hear. Shadow of nobody there. Murders of murderers living in fear. Owls on the night watch, solemn and easily wise to what we thought they thought above. Sound broke below. They were in the black wood, coveting indiscreetly, her for him or him for her, shown what they were. I was in the middle ground, looking to find the fountain of infinite mirror. Tree falling, no one.
Oh, we have the reverse sounds?
Shadow of nobody there. Murders of murderers.
Like tapping on a microphone?
I was in the clearing, buzzing around to hearing what the bees and birds knew the words. Soon arrived the twilight, finally the night and day.
Very musical theater. We've moved away from our original arpeggiations into a new idea here too. Very thin electric guitar. What in the world?
For nothing at all, with something to do.
All right, very Queen right here. So compressed though.
Looking to see the trees, but none were there.
All right, that goes directly into the next track. I can't. Okay. The last analysis break, I was like, I understand the way this album works. Foundation, atmosphere, vocals. The instruments cover everything else. They don't really get very many melodies. And then as soon as I said that, Joe's like, hey, wait a second. We'll have a full track of instrumental melodies for you. I wish I had held off just one more track. But yeah, so this was a nice change of pace. We had a lot of catchy lines coming out of coming out of the instruments. We had the piano starting off with our arpeggiation line. We had some weird organ piano hybrid going on that gave us some nice melody lines. We had the piano solo, we had the guitar solo. Yeah, just a great amount of memorable melodic lines coming out of instruments. Now, the instrumental collage is an interesting collection of sounds. I don't know that it all works. I think this is the least coherent track we've listened to so far. And interestingly, I think it's one of the most comprehensive as far as what it's achieving. For the most part, all the instruments feel like they fit together. They all feel like they fit the vibe perfectly. Nothing feels like we're smashing disparate sounds together and trying to smooth over the rough edges. It feels like he's trying to work within one sound, and I find that ridiculously comical that this is the one that feels the most disjointed to me, because at least on a compositional level, everything is a bit different, which is a very different approach to writing. So like even on that front, I thought I had a grasp on what's going on here, and this whole song just blows apart every topic I think I've talked about regarding the album as a whole. Now, maybe that's intentional. This is also supposed to be a dark track. I assume that for all the songs about love lost and gained, this one kind of pushes it a little bit further. There's murder, at least in the title. I assume there's murder in the lyrics. Although that doesn't have to be true. But at least White Ball... Oh, man, I just noticed that Black Rainbows and White Ball. We have a black and white opposites motif going on right there. Speaking on motifs, I know I wasn't quite done with that, but where are they? Am I missing them? I feel like a lot of the little bit of information I checked out at the beginning to sort of get myself in the right mindset, I've been led astray on it. I've been told this is an album full of motifs and themes, and yet I've heard none. I also read that it was an album about the Twin Towers, and I've seen none of that. What I grasped on that I feel is quite weak as far as a metaphor going on here. I almost feel like I've been tricked. And like from a certain point of view, this kind of feels like a trolley album, especially if Joe is going out and saying, no, it's actually a 9/11 album. Even though he said it's a 9/11 commemorative band, but the band's only made one album. I think I already went on this bit earlier. Kind of difficult to dissect the band from the music when they've only made one music. But like that feels kind of trolly. And then being told that it's full of themes and motifs and musically every song is disparate. I'm not really hearing anything melodically or colorfully or based on timbre. I'm not seeing much that connects many of these songs aside from the themes of love lost, which, yeah, that is a thematic connection, but I wouldn't really call that a motif. Or pretty much every pop album has that motif these days. Maybe not these days. That might have been truer a decade ago. Every emo album has a motif. We'll go that direction. I don't know. Like I said, I feel like everything I read to prep on this was wrong. And that's an interesting feeling because it makes me feel like I've been pranked. And there are some things in this album that have made me laugh, but for the most part, I would not call this a joke album. I would not call this a troll album, even though it is eclectic and esoteric and experimental, all those good E words. I wouldn't say that it's comedic. I wouldn't say that it's intentionally trying to be weird for the lulz. It is genuine in what it's attempting to do, which makes me question all the more about Joe's interviews and what he said about this. I don't know. I will tell you, we're halfway through, give or take. I mean, we have the longest album or longest tracks ahead of us, so I think timeline wise, we're still on the first half, but we're done with 5 out of 11 tracks. Pretty much at the halfway point. I don't get it. I'm enjoying myself. Don't get me wrong. I don't think I have a problem with any of these tracks. They're palatable. A couple of them are memorable, or at least have memorable hooks. Overall, the album's very memorable. I don't know that I'm gonna forget it. It's unique, if nothing else. But I would never say that I understand what's going on, and I think that's a typical first listen. But I think there are very few albums we've checked out where I have felt as lost as I do now. I usually have something to say about what's going on. And here, I don't. All right, let's carry on. I didn't have a lot to talk about there, but I had to bring up just the whole joke that I was like, I understand how they write songs, and then they went a completely different route. They scrapped that blueprint as soon as I brought it up. Let's hit some lyrics, and then we'll check out the next one. One quick note before we get into the lyrics. Reading through the verses, I was reminded just how odd they are rhythmically. I'm reading through these lines. I'm like, there is no flow to this at all. And I was like, wait a second, there was a flow to it. And that's when I remember the weird phrasing in the song. So here's the thing. Every time I tried to count out how many beats a phrase was, which is basically how I had it was that there was a high point to the vocals. They started high and usually dipped down in intensity as the line went on. There's also a change in the musicality where it starts out on chords and then shifts to little notes, or almost like flourishes or ornamentation. And when we hit that chord again, it lines up with the rise of intensity in the vocals. So that was beat 1 for me, and that was rather consistent. I could always find 1. But every time I tried to count out how long it was until we reached that return to the top, it was different. The first time was, what did I count? 20, I say 26, 22, something like that. It was some number of bars of 4/4, either 5 or 6, and then the next bar was only 2 beats. It was half of a bar. So it's like 5.5 bars, 6.5 bars, and 4/4. It's like a weird way to do it. But then another time I counted it out, I only got 19, which isn't even, which means it's not in the middle of a bar. Because after that first time, I was like, well, counting by bars doesn't work. So I had to count out, individual beats. And every time I went for it, it was different. I'm curious if anybody has transposed that and knows what the time signature is of all that. It's quite possible it's still in 4/4. Maybe some point after like 17 or 20 bars of music, it all lines up within, 20 bars at 4 beats per bar, 80 beats, maybe. I don't know. I know that it's a whirlwind, though, for me. I could never quite find my footing in it, and I basically just had to go along for the ride, which was neat. The inflection points, what syllables he would put emphasis on, how that worked with and sometimes against what our instrument was emphasizing. It was an interesting idea. I'm not going to say it was poorly written, because it wasn't. It was just really difficult to follow. And I think there's purpose to that. Because the song is kind of about getting lost. It starts out with a boy in a forest looking to see the trees, but none were there. And I had a headache from this first line. You're in a forest, but there's no trees. Dude, you're not in a forest then, bro. I know it's metaphorical, right? But I couldn't avoid that joke because I read that and I was like, if you don't see trees, you're not in the forest, dude. It says, but he found a girl instead. And she found the Earl King. And I had to look that up, and it's the King of Fairies. And then it says that they frolicked out to a picnic and then fell below. And then there's a pre-verse that says, I was in the middle ground looking to find the... And this is actually how the chorus starts, but we don't actually get into the chorus. We kick off with verse 2. He says, flowers in the garden. I was looking to find the flowers in the garden. Weary of the hate me not. Wait, they forgot. Woe, oh the rot. So this person is hated or not hated for some reason. The idea is, you love me not, love me not. It says that he's looking for flowers in the garden, but the inverse of that, hate me not. So there's, it seems general discourse about this person. Maybe he flip-flops as a hero or a villain in the local town or whatever. He says, but they forgot all about that. So deeper in they crept, oblivious of the bears and darker terrors, or none were there. How did they dare? I'm not sure if that is supposed to be about the bears and terrors. How did they even dare to go down there? Of course they weren't down there. Maybe that's why there weren't any. Regardless, they didn't notice that there were any, which I think is an interesting detail. It says they were oblivious of the terrors, or maybe the terrors weren't even there because why would they even dare to go down there? That kind of idea, right? Like, why bring it up? But I do think it's an interesting detail, so I appreciate that it's in there. We finally get to see the full chorus here. I was in the middle ground looking to find the fountain of infinite mirror. Tree falling, no one would hear. Shadow of nobody there. Murders of murderers living in fear of it. Now this is cryptic. What does this mean? What is the fountain of infinite mirrors? I'm thinking water. Water is reflection. We're not necessarily talking about infinite mirrors, but infinite reflections, the ability to see all within oneself, maybe, possibly. I don't know. But it also mentions that it might not be there. The old adage, if a tree falls, would anyone hear it? If the sound is produced but no one hears the sound, was the sound even made? I think if the tree falls and no one's there, would it even make a sound? That's the idea. He says a tree is falling and no one would hear. There's a shadow of nobody there. So a bunch of impossibilities here. But there's murders of murderers living in fear of it. Presumably it is the infinite mirror? I don't know. Speaks about owls who can clearly see everything that's going on. They're solemn and easily wise to what we thought. Coveting indiscreetly her for him, or him for her, shown what they were. The idea that these two people were not what they said they were, and they both secretly had feelings for each other. They were hiding something from each other despite that. It says, I was in the clearing, buzzing around to hearing, but the bees and birds who knew the words soon arrived the twilight. Finally, the night and day remembered how they came to be. So night and day are in opposition of each other. And, there's mythologies about them personified as people, and they're typically always in fights with each other, I suppose. So is that saying that the two people here begin to quarrel? I don't know. The outro, though, says all for nothing at all. With something to do, I was in the forest looking to see the trees, but none were there. So, on the surface of this story, we have a person wanting to see trees. He went to where there was no forest and then complained that he didn't see trees, but instead he found a girl, and they fell down into an area, and they explored it, and they had feelings for each other, but then they remembered that they hated each other, and then he ended up looking for another forest and winding up at a place again where there was no forest. It is another story about a relationship that supposedly comes together and ends. It is a story that ends where it begins. I don't know, man. Let's keep going on this wild ride. Still in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, every line, what's the story about? How does this relate to the Twin Towers? And I just I'm not seeing it. All right. We got a couple seconds. I'm going to rewind it a couple seconds as well. And then we'll go into this next track, which I can't pronounce because I don't know what it is. Oh, come on. I feel like the music's getting more esoteric as we go on. Like, this bass line is not lining up with anything else. Oh, now it is. It just didn't line up with the intro. We have a digitization to the voice. It's also locking onto notes in a way that makes it feel like it's robotic, like it's been pitch corrected aggressively. Very dreamlike. I love the bouncing back and forth on that. Ooh, tension on that brass. Oh no, it's a synth, isn't it? I love that line. Very victorious. Is this French? Okay. We got a fade out on this. I'm just gonna push into the next track. It's 6 minutes. I don't have much to say about that one. It's a fun track. And it does introduce us to almost a Vocaloid. Vocoder? No, it's pitch corrected. It's been auto-tuned. This is reversed? I love watching the volume thing go in reverse. It's the whole song backwards. Wait, some samples over here that are in forward?
Think of these thoughts as limitless light, exposing, closing, circuitry to fight. Think of each moment holding this breath as death, minute and decimal. Resident minor, you will need your testimony on the stand.
This is also very musical theater.
Father, your honor, may I explain? My brain has claimed its glory over me. I've a good heart, albeit yes.
Now, many of these ideas we're hearing many of the same musical ideas as the first half. But I don't know if it's a direct mirroring. You say understand what's going on in my mind?
When it grows bright, the particles start to marvel, having made it through the night. Never they ponder whether electric calming if you look at it right.
So what was it? The first 4 tracks all run together, and everything after that so far has not. Is that more of a suite of ideas? I'm curious how much information I'm missing by not looking at the annotations, because I'm sure something like that has already been chronicled and analyzed by the fandom. But yeah, it's a very distinct pattern now. I'm allowing songs just go to the end because for the past 3 endings, 5, 6, and 7, yeah, they've just ended. Oh, 4 also ended, right? White Ball didn't go into Murders, did it? So I've used the word esoteric to describe the works on this album, and I think this is the most esoteric track. It's the most experimental for sure. It is cerebral. It invites the experience beyond the music. This has been what I've been trying to explore in my own writing in the past few years, is exploring what can be done outside of the paper. And I've made some pretty cool stuff, I think. And I'm drawn to this. I find this to be exceptionally fascinating. Granted, I have no idea what's going on. It's definitely a frustrating listen in my position. Casually, this is probably a lot less stressful. You're worrying about you're not worrying about trying to piece this oddity together into something that makes sense. But there are what sounds like 5 or 6 different written ideas on here, but then in production, when you're actually putting the song together, it's about chopping them up and using bits and pieces here and there and making something that isn't musical. A lot of what this song is to me isn't about what is harmonically or melodically happening. It's about what's happening thematically through the production. For instance, the first 2.5 minutes are the next 2.5 minutes, give or take, reversed. Maybe. I mean, it's certainly reversed, sure. But is it exactly the next 2.5 minutes? Is it a perfect mirroring? Mirroring. That's a tough word. Did they simply write out that stuff, copy paste it prior to it on the audio workstation, and then reverse the audio? My gut says no. The order seems to be about right, and the general ideas seem to be about right. But there's so many little nuances I picked up on the reverse that I didn't hear going forward, and I don't think that they were perfectly in line either, in that the first part would be exactly 2 minutes and 33 seconds, and the second part is equally 2 minutes and 32 seconds. Because that would have run us into 5 minutes, and it's only a 6 minute and 10-second song, and we ditched that idea pretty quickly to move into our channel surfing concept prior to 5 minutes, I think. So what I want to do now is get myself a copy of this track, toss it into a workstation, and take that opening whatever, re-reverse it, make it go forward again, and line it up with whatever comes after that, and see how similar they are. Depending on what time I wrap this video up, I may record that and put it as an extra part of this video. Otherwise, I'll have to do it another day, and if I find anything of interest, I can make a separate video or maybe like a Discord, YouTube community post about it. Because I'm curious. It's going to be done. It's just whether I'll have time to do it today in this recording session or not. So yeah, we have the backmask section and then possibly the forward version of it, and then channel surfing, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, quickly switching back and forth. And then return to some of the older sounds that we had in this track. And I picked up a line that says, try to understand my mind or something like that. And the song's called The Mind Electric. And I mean, is this just about, I don't even know. I was going to say I should probably hit the lyrics and figure out what's going on there before I try to understand this, because it really isn't something that I think stands apart on its musicality. It isn't something like I can say, oh, the chords here make me feel this, and paired with this melody makes me feel this, so it's probably not. Like, it's all production-wise. It makes it vaguer, I think. There's certainly some production techniques that lend themselves well to a specific feeling, much like major is typically associated with happiness. But this is just, like I mentioned, it's esoteric, it's experimental. When you do things that no one else has done, you're stepping outside the realms of the established language. And thus, you can't fall back on typical tropes for understanding. It's difficult for me to say that this makes me feel any way because I don't have anything to pair it to. At best, the channel surfing reminds me of channel surfing. It's a difficulty to stay on one topic. I can certainly attribute that to mental states, to ways that people think. Some people are a bit more scatterbrained. It's tough for them to stay on a subject long. Is that what's happening here? I don't know. I can't really say that with any level of authority, but I would need to understand the lyrics, and that doesn't really happen on this album either, does it? So, was there anything else I wanted to touch on? Oh, yeah. So the track before it as well, and I don't know what it's called. It introduced something that we've heard a ton of in here, which is interesting. I'm going to touch on this. It's pitch correction. Track 6 leans into it a little bit lighter. It still has a locking on to specific pitches, which gives it a robotic feel, but it still has a human element to it. It's just heavy-handed pitch correction. It sounds odd against the rest of the track, specifically odd against Murders, which had the other vocalist in it, which just phenomenal voice, right? Phenomenal natural voice. Sure, there's probably a little bit of production. Every engineer is going to produce your vocals a little bit. Raw vocals, there's very few genres that utilize them. But for the most part, it's got a very natural sound to his vocals. And to go from that to track 6. Oh no, that was White Ball. So we got Joe back in Murders. Still though, natural vocals to a bit too much pitch correction. You could have backed that off just a hair bit into the Mind Electric, which is like full on vocoder stuff. I don't know if it was a vocoder. For all I know, there's a way that you can, well, there probably is a way you can make vocals just very robotic, sounding like a 90s voice box kind of robot. Something you'd find at, like, I don't know, a theme park, the life of the future. And you go in there and there's like poorly constructed robots. And they're like, hello, how can I help you today? Like that kind of stuff. That's what the vocals in Mind Electric reminded me of. And yeah, so just a ton of vocal distortion. What does that mean? I mentioned at the beginning, this whole album to me, I think, is going to be thematically resonant on the production side because that's where a lot of the emotion is stemming from. It's where a lot of the changes and characterizations of the songs are coming from. And so for most of this album, that's where I've been asking the question. Yeah, White Ball had some classical elements and a string section. Well, yeah, it's kind of like ballroom music, right? It's very surface level. The production is where things click. It's where the magic happens, though. And so, what does all the production mean here? That's my big question for the Mind Electric. A lot to explore here. First of all, I want y'all to know that I went and grabbed all of the backwards lyrics that were presented in Genius. I checked the annotation for them, and many of them, it seems, they just reversed their annotation for the stanza or the line or whatever. But they didn't actually reverse what was actually stated. So I went and reversed it all and read through it. And here's the thing, is that there's a lot of stuff in here that's forward stated, such as in chorus 2. In between all the backward singing, there is a conversation to be had that moves into verse 1. The conversation is spoken in forward while the song is moving in reverse across both of these verses. I had to parse that out so I could only get what was reversed. So, here's the thing. It covers 5 verses, 2 choruses that are similar but different, a post-chorus, and a bridge. This is all represented both in the forward portion and the back portion. Lyrically, at least. Musically, it's not. As I mentioned, the second half shifts, otherwise it would take up the entire song, and we explore something a little bit different at the end. Regardless, everything that we do here in reverse, lyrically and for the most part musically, is presented going forward as well. It is a incomplete but near perfect mirroring of the song. I have no idea what any of it's about, though. It seems to be a story that moves semi-chronologically with several time gaps. Verse 1 is a bit esoteric, but verse 2 jumps in and says, "Resident minor, how do you plead? We'll need your testimony on the stand. Solemnly swear to tell the whole truth, so help you son, now raise your right hand." Verse 3 says, "Father, your honor, may I explain, my brain has claimed its glory over me. I'm a good heart, albeit Enasni," which is insane backwards. I went and checked in the backwards area if that was forwards, but it's also still backwards. The word insane cannot get flipped normally. Interesting tidbit. I have a good heart, but my mind has claimed glory over me. And the judge says, "Condemn him to the infirmary." From here, it's a scattering of ideas. There's metaphorical falling of towers. I think it's metaphorical anyways. That represents his structure and stabilization falling down. There's a part where he prays, hoping for help. A part where nuns come in and commence an incantation, axon dendrite, with a second, or I guess a third voice coming in saying, "Help me." Says, "Lightning strikes mine temples thus, electrifying mine chambers, wholly scorching out thine sovereignty." If we do have somebody who said that they are mentally unwell after committing a crime, this could be electroshock therapy. The post-chorus has him spiraling down, pleading for sympathy. And then verse 5 comes back to something a bit more esoteric. It says, "When it grows bright, The particles start to marvel, having made it through the night. Never they ponder whether electric, calming if you look at it right. I don't know. I don't understand the reverse thing. The channel flipping sequence appears to come before the electroshock therapy section. Honestly, I'm getting a lot of flickers of ideas, but I just can't find a way to tie them together. Here's something strange, is that I skipped a track. I did, but that's not where I was going. It says that this operates as a palindrome. It's a song shrouded in mystery and largely left to the listener's interpretation, and it seems that the mystery was cultivated intentionally, as the official version of the song uploaded to YouTube is a reversed version of the album release. That's bonkers. There's also an official lyric video that was released in 2015, has a seizure warning as the lyrics flash onto the screen in solid bright colors. But even more peculiar is that this is a much older song, or at least a much older idea. It first appeared on a MySpace page for the user Tally Holly. Tally Holly? Tally Holly. I don't know. I don't know if that's a fan page for Tally Hall or if it's an official page, but in 2006, a song called Inside the Mind of Simon popped up that was very similar to this, and that version of this track has been included on a subsequent disc called Hawaii Part 2 Part 2, which is full of demos and ad-libs and a bunch of instrumental versions. It's a companion piece, a companion album to this one, and it has this as the Mind Electric Demo 3. So, this is the first track, unless the previous one also falls into this, that isn't about relationships. It isn't about loss. It isn't about grief. It is about something, regret, a loss of control. It's about punishment for something that you did but didn't do. I don't know. It seems divorced from everything else on the album thus far, and it's also the one that seems to have been created possibly before the album's concept was even in mind. Now, I did forget one. We need to jump back a second to track number 6, the one with the Japanese characters for the title. It translates to Space Station Level 7. Why track 6 is called Space Station Level 7? I don't know. I'm sure there's something more to it. I'm sure they saw this as well. You certainly couldn't have put the Mind Electric before this. I don't think that would have worked in the flow of the album. But I like things to line up. I would have liked Space Station Level 7 to be track 7. That's like a personal thing. It has nothing to do with the music. It is weird thing about my brain, whatever. It's just kind of a little irritated. It's just one track off. This one is sung in Japanese for most of it. There is one English word that pops up, heaven, and the bridge is in French, which I called that correctly, but I was also kind of hoping I was wrong, because that's like a really weird thing to do. I'm curious what the purpose of it is. This one also was not sung by Joe. It was sung by Bora Karaka, one of Joe's bandmates from Tally Hall. It's a rather short track. We can go through every line real quick. 15 years later, the wait is over. It's impossible to leave the earth behind. We depart from heaven. It's not a secret. Everyone knows right away. So I find this interesting. Assuming that this is a space station, because that's what it's called, we are in it above Earth. And it is called heaven. I assume we depart from it to go back to Earth because we can't leave it. We've been away for 15 years, but we can't leave the Earth. We have to go back and visit. Verse 2 says it's a space station on Earth. Also, nothing compares to this. Use the ladder to reach level 7. Sleep, my child. Bright eyes are waiting. This is the second time Bright Eyes has been brought up on this album. I'm not sure its relevance, but the idea of things are watching that you can clearly see are watching you is something that seems prevalent for some reason. The chorus just says, Kingdom of Heaven. Heaven is waiting. That's it. That's the whole song right there. The wait is over. We have to go back to Earth. Everyone knows it. And there's a space station on Earth. And when you go to level 7, you can sleep there. And that is heaven. I'm honestly not sure what any of this means. The bridge translates to a set of children. The galaxy is expanding. Garden of imagination. I have to say good evening. Get started and you'll still live tonight. That's the second time bringing up the idea of child, of children. Is this about the future? We have to invest in the children. They're the ones who need to learn how to do all of this stuff. They need to know how to reach level 7 of the space station. They need to know how to use the Garden of Imagination. I don't know. Much like the Mind Electric, this is a very strange place to go after sort of telling me, hey, it's a song about two. There's always a me and a girl that we never work out, and so life kind of sucks sometimes, but it's about the grief process and also the Twin Towers. There are two of them, remember that? That's the two of us. And then this. It's not a love song at all. It's cryptic as all get out. It's not in English, but it's also not in one language either. I had to translate two groups of words. And then the next track after this is reversed for 40% of it and is also not about love or about duality. Well, it's kind of about duality. The person as he is now in full control of his facilities and the person before when he wasn't in control and did something wrong, presumably, and was tried for it, but he says he wasn't in control of his body at the time. There is a duality there, but it's not one I can clearly relate to the rest of the themes of the album. And in any other album, that'd be fine. It's just another song, but here, this album's different. Everything's supposed to connect. I don't know. You know, I've kind of extended the invitation. If you have any thoughts about these songs, specifically the lyrics, but even on the musical side, let me know in the comment section. I need a lot of help on this album. These two tracks right here, though, are telling me that I'm getting into the deep end. I was wading into it, doggy paddling through the shallow end, kind of making connections, seeing patterns, and then I've clearly crossed a barrier. This album doesn't make any sense to me anymore. I'm not seeing any correlations between ideas. I'm drowning. Someone help me, please. Oh, man. I guess we should push forward now. Alrighty. Moving forward. Labyrinth. This one's rather short, 2.5. We may just move right into Time Machine afterwards.
See how I circle imaginary lines that the maze of my design carry you on.
struggle, running through hurdles, running in circles, trying to escape from this thing that I fear. Everything seems clear, like the end is near. In the rear, I can see the beast getting close, surrounded by ghosts in the cloud of smoke. The smoke reeks of failure. I don't want to fail, but all the stairwells lead straight to hell. So I'm jumping trap doors in the floor before they for me. Focus on the love and the light right before me. Walls keep spinning and my path keeps turning. Patience thinning and my calves keep burning. Hotter than the furnace. Suddenly I'm learning. Maybe I finally reached the point of no returning. East is north and west is south. I feel like I will never get out. I'm trapped.
What in the world?
Behind me, my ex-girl's chasing me. In front of me, my next girl's facing me. Awaiting me, the lights in my sight, but I can't cross these enemy lines up behind. I can feel the fatigue, but I'm dying to shine. But the road winds, I rewind, I rewind. Gotta find a new place to hide for the night. Will I ever escape? Or I try and I try. Everybody's watching
Just
me.
a
I'm
flurry
dying
of
out.
samples.
In the glass labyrinth, I am the mouse. I'm trapped. I'm trapped.
Gorgeous harmonies.
I'm trapped.
Yeah, this is just straight up video game music though. Chiptune 100%.
I'm trapped. I'm trapped. I'm trapped.
Look at what you've done now to me. Get tired and ornery. I'm leaving today, today. Thinking of the way I used to spend the time. I can see that I have overpaid. Past is past, and rather than regret the old, I can live it back the other way. Just look, oh look at what you've done now to me. Free floating temporarily. I'm leaving today, today. I'm avoid the messiness of misery. Playing in dimensional before. I can get away to any time I like. Space times anytime and anymore. With the dream, with a time machine, you've been waiting for. You can make a way.
It's interesting to hear these tracks on the back end simplify the music down. It's still foundation, atmosphere, and ornamentation to sit under the vocals, but there's less layers per part now. There's only 3 parts now.
I await for all eternity. Withstanding modernity is where we must stay today. Now I know the nature of no urgency. Now I know why now is never gone. Fleeting in this mode of making memories. Keeping up this pace of keeping on. Live the dream in a time machine. You've been waiting for.
Very catchy chorus here. especially given the halftime feel against the verse. Yeah, so many of all of the tracks, all of the tracks are just ending. I don't think we have a single transition one. Even Labyrinth, which sounded like it was gonna go right up into Time Machine, ends abruptly at 0 seconds to go and doesn't move into it. It's still kind of perplexing why the first four are cohesive and the rest aren't. There's got to be purpose for that. I talked about simplification of sound. Labyrinth and Time Machine both explore a more electronic style of composition as well as an electronic sound. We move towards chiptune and synths and electronic drum kit stuff while still utilizing many of the same ideas presented throughout the rest of the album, except for... What track was that? It was Murders, wasn't it? Murders was the one that gave us a bunch of lead instrument solos. Yeah, aside from that, most of the songs have had all the instruments either presuming a foundational role, sitting on the bottom, giving us chord progression or harmonic ideas, or something atmospheric or ornamental above and around the vocals, creating this pocket in the middle for the vocals to carry the melody throughout all these songs. Murders was the only one that really went against that, and I don't know what that means either. Why does that one have melodies given to the instruments? What does that mean? Anyways, the thing is, though, is that we had many layers within that. Our foundation might have been 3 instruments giving us harmonic information. We might have had a couple of different instruments doing flourishy ornamental stuff. We might have had 2 or 3 instruments utilizing their timbre, the sound of their instrument, to give us a specific atmosphere, a warmth or a coldness or something. Here we have the same framing: foundation, ornamental, atmosphere. That's the only thing our instruments do, but we only have 1 instrument per roll now. Sometimes we don't even have a roll, like the ornamental one we don't use in Labyrinth much. It's used towards the end, and in Time Machine during the chorus we have very little of it as well. It's the same blueprint here, but just executed in a different way. Rather than having many smaller sounds, we have 1 larger sound. It fills the same space, but it means we have less layers. It's less musically dense. We're exploring some of the same melodic ideas that we did in stuff like Isle Unto Myself and Black Rainbows. So harmonically and melodically and kind of all across the board, the composition is very similar, but it feels different because of the production. This is like my big through line. It's the only thing I'm rather confident on, that I started early and I'm still seeing patterns going through. Every other idea I've had's been riddled with issues. I've been wrong about them. But I'm glad to see that this continues on. Something else that I find interesting is the production on the vocals. Ever since Space Station 7, we've had a digitization to them. Labyrinth is the only divorce from this. We had a new vocalist, though, for it. It was also delivered via rapping rather than singing. It sort of stands out not just within this pocket of songs, but within the entire album. I'm curious to get into the lyrics to see what's going on there. But Time Machine, The Mind, Electric, and Space Station 7 all have digital voicings. Somebody really singing and it being altered, whether it's through a vocoder or some post-production effects put on it. Stranded Lullaby, I'll be surprised if we hear more of that because it's a lullaby and there's an energy and electricness to creating the digitization of the voice. And I think that's going to go against what a lullaby should be. And Dream Suite in C major, I vaguely remember hearkening back to that 50s sound that kicked us off with our first track, Introduction to the Snow. So I think we're going to return back to that more so than stick with this robot thing. But, I mean, the end result is that the album ends up feeling like it has acts. We have our 4-song suite that kicks the song off. They all share similar vibes, though they explore it a little bit differently. With Isle Unto Thyself, harkening back to more of a 50s sound, Black Rainbows being a bit more 60s psychedelic stuff, and then White Ball being classical. Murders takes us to a bit more of the modern sound with a lot of electric organ, electric guitar, some synth in there. It also disrupts the compositional pattern by giving the melody to instruments. And here we really push into the electronic side of things with Space Station 7, The Mind Electric, Labyrinth, at least musically, and Time Machine. This is our electronic or modern era section. They're not connected like our first 4-song suite are, in that every song moves into the next, but they are connected by sonic identity. And so I find this really interesting. We have a 4-song suite, an interlude, and then a 4-song suite about the electronic side of the album. Who knows where our last 2 tracks are going to... Well, I know some people who know. I don't know where the next 2 tracks are going to take us. But I don't think it's going to be where we are now. And I think those are my 2 big notes here. The simplification of the music and the digitization of the voice. Everything else fits because everything else is mirroring what we had seen prior. I'm still trying to take all of this in, though. I don't think this album is a direct story. If it is, it's not told sequentially, I don't believe. Primarily because many of the tracks deal with the same thing. Unless our main character is just jumping from relationship to relationship and all of them ending in heartbreak and reminiscing on the same things, the first 4 tracks don't feel like they move together too well. Murders is an interesting song because it feels like it could relate to the first 4, but maybe not. Space Station 7 takes a drastic shift in storytelling, as does The Mind Electric, and we'll dive into Labyrinth and Time Machine in just a couple seconds, but any thread of a story or recurring themes has been tossed out the window for me. I thought I had a weak grasp on what was going on, and ever since track 5, as I mentioned at the end of our last section, I'm just drowning in the deep end. I thought I was good treading water, and well, that was only when I had the safety of the ground beneath me in the shallow end. Now that I can't cheat, I'm sinking. So let's hit some lyrics, see what's going on there. All right, I'm starting to get a little bit of a tighter grasp on this. Once again, we have two new vocalists, though. We have Kay doing the female clean vocals, and Shane Maux, I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly, doing the rapping. I continue to find this perplexing. I understand that maybe Joe can't rap. Makes sense to pull in someone for that. But I don't think that Kay did anything that. Who was the other vocalist that we've consistently had on this track, on this album? Mari? I could have sworn she sang on that track too. Oh, Maddie. Yep, I was close. Yeah, there's nothing that I think Kay did that Maddie couldn't have. That's not to say that we can't have had, new vocalists just to have one, but I guess my question is, why does Joe decide to change vocalists when he does? That's my thing. We keep some vocalists, sometimes we change them in others, and aside from this one place where Shane comes in and does the rapping, I don't see the purpose of it, unless it's just to give, hey, you're my friend, you want to feature on my album? Sure, let's do it. Maybe there's a non-musical reason for it. But this also seems to be an album that's very close to him, and that seems like a frivolous decision to make given how important every small detail is on the album. So anyways, Shane's verses are about being stuck in a labyrinth. There's some really nice instances of flow going on in here. Talks about constantly getting into hurdles, bumping his head, running in circles, getting lost. He's trying to escape from something that he fears. But he's pretty sure he can't outrun this. He says, trying to escape from this thing that I fear. Everything seems clear, like the end is near. In the rear, I can see the beast getting close, surrounded by ghosts in a cloud of smoke. That right there, just the flow of it rhythmically is really great, but we also have a lot of that interline rhyming where we do have fear and near ending our sentences, but we also have clear in between them. And then in the very next line, we have in the rear, I can see the beast getting close. And this begins our next rhyme, because then we see surrounded by ghosts in a cloud of smoke. It's written really well, and it is fun to listen to. And I think that's the kind of rapping I really dig. Aside from just technical stuff, fast technical rapping is always going to impress me on the same reason that shredding on an instrument impresses me. I can see the passion and the years of dedication put towards a craft. But I find this to be like a tasteful guitar solo, where like there might be a little bit of shred in there. You can tell that they're very they have a high level of musicianship, but they're restraining for the song and finding other ways to show off other parts of their skill set. And that's where stuff like this comes in. Just really great use of vocabulary and words and rhyming, and understand the flow of linguistics. Interestingly, a lot of this opening verse reminds me of a video game. It speaks about having to jump over trap doors, that there's stairwells that lead straight to hell, there's fire whipping all around, walls are spinning, paths keep turning. It becomes hotter than a furnace in here. It reminds me a lot of like a fantasy dungeon kind of thing. Now, things kind of shift in our second verse. It says, behind me, my ex-girl's chasing me. In front of me, my next girl's facing me, awaiting me, the lights in my sight. I had just talked about how it's a possibility that this person jumps from relationship to relationship I had kind of assumed that all the girls were one. As stated in our very first track, you are infinite, you are immortal, something like that. There was an I at the edge of the universe, and you were infinitely around me. I knew singularity, but it's come to my attention that it's possible the you is a plural. It is not any one person, but the concept of a relationship bringing him life. He states, my next girl's in front of me, awaiting me, the light is in my sight. It's not just the exit being, a light. You're going through a cave and you're like, oh, I see light. That's how I get out of here, right? That kind of deal. But it's also light as in enlightenment or just positivity in general. There's a lot of darkness on this album. And so it almost feels to me that he's using relationships as a way to attempt to make his life better. Somebody else is going to save him. He just hasn't found that person yet. And every person he meets is the prospective savior. And when things go south, well, they're not anymore. Someone else will carry that light. He's not taking any responsibility for himself, for his own happiness. So the idea that all of these girls are different but also the same, I think rings true on this. And it was this one line, plus the fact I just touched on this idea, but I sort of dismissed it because like, that's kind of ridiculous. But no, it actually looks like it might be where it's going. But anyways, he says, I can't cross these enemy lines. I'm behind. I can feel the fatigue, but I'm dying to shine. But the road winds and I rewind. I got to find a new place to hide. Will I ever escape? Now, I really like this part. It says, I'm dying to get out. In this glass labyrinth, I am the mouse. Glass labyrinth. If it's glass, you can see through it. I don't quite know what he's getting at there, but it's another one of those lines that I think has more depth to it, but on the surface, it's kind of like being in a forest, but there's no trees. Like, dude, you're not in a forest. Like, I know on a poetic level, there's some depth to it, but like, here's like, dude, just, you can see through the walls. Just find the exit and go for it. So, yeah, just, here's the thing though. This is all juxtaposed by Kay's chorus. See how I circle, imaginary mind, imaginary lines. Let the maze of my design carry you on, see how I fly away. This has a really nice interline rhyme scheming that we don't really see elsewhere in this album, and it makes me wonder if whoever wrote it was also the person who wrote Shane's rapped lyrics. It is sung with clean vocals, but it's written more poetically. But Kay seems to be the embodiment of the labyrinth, which could possibly be the embodiment of this ex-girlfriend he's running from. I don't know. It ends with, it's just a game you play here in the labyrinth maze, and then I'm trapped over and over and over again. Bringing up the concept of games again, I haven't seen any, there haven't really been a lot of annotations on sections. So I don't know if there's any more nods to other video game music, but as we move into Time Machine, actually no, this song too, Labyrinth, had some video game sounds to it, and I think by the end of it, I even said that's straight up chiptune music right there. Like I could hear that in a variety of games. So yeah, calling it a game. This is the second time we've had a female vocalist tell the male character that he plays games or he's stuck in a game and something along those lines. Games come up quite often, which I think has a dual meaning here. One, in the concept of relationships, playing games, not being truthful, doing stuff behind people's backs, just not taking it seriously in general, right? But then there is the video game soundtrack stuff that is going on in a few of these tracks that I think is difficult to ignore. A lot of chiptune sounds. I mean, until we get here, which is like all chiptune sounds throughout. Yeah. Okay, first of all, Labyrinth has a video game. I guess it was made for the song. I guess that's another supplemental thing I might have. Actually, I don't have to do the other one because I got confirmation that lyrically it lines up. Like every single line is the same on the Electric Mind one. I was going to do the backmasking on the backmask to see how that lines up. But yeah, lyrically it's identical, so I'm not going to worry about that. There's a video game though. I might go look it up, see if I have any thoughts on it. Time Machine though. So this is a song where our character starts out at the beginning and is tired and ornery and says, he says, thinking of the way I used to spend the time, I can see that I have overpaid. Past is past, and rather than regret the old, I can live it back the other way. So I like that. The way I used to spend the time. Literally spending it. So he says I've overpaid. Right? I put too much time down for me to be here. So he says rather than regret it, I'm going to live it another way. Assuming this is where he gets into his time machine. Verse 2 says, free floating temporally. I'm leaving today. I avoid the messiness of misery playing in dimension number 4. The fourth dimension is often stated to be time. If our 3 other dimensions are width, depth, and height, the fourth one is frequently described as time. So now he is in a time machine traversing time. It says, I can get away to any time I like, space times, anytime, and many more. The chorus says, live the dream with a time machine. You've been waiting forever, but you can make ever wait for you. Do what you want to do. Verse 3 talks about a loss of understanding of time. It says, I wait for all eternity, withstanding modernity is where we must stay today. Now I know the nature of no urgency. Now I know why now is never gone. Fleeting in this mode of making memories, keeping up this pace of keeping on. I love this verse. It is about how important time is, and realizing that without time, nothing has context. What's the point of anything? Now, we hit the chorus again, and there's a part in the chorus where there's some chugging and some whirring, and then the song stops. I didn't know what that was about, because I didn't know it was about a time machine. In retrospect, that's what that was, and the second chorus ends with, you've been waiting forever, you'll have enough time to spend some time alone. All alone. I'm alone. I presume his time machine broke in the middle of transport and now he's stuck between times. And so the outro is the repetition of live the dream with the time machine, you've been waiting forever. Over and over and over and over, and it's sort of taunting him. This is a very Twilight Zone ending to this. Very much has the same energy as Time Enough at Last. There was time enough at last. Anyways, it's about a guy who found a stopwatch. He could freeze time. And all he wanted to do was read books, but life was busy. He had his job and all this stuff. And so he found a way to freeze time. And the watch broke, I think. And so it was stuck in frozen time. And he's like, whatever, I'll just go read forever now. And then he breaks his glasses. And now he can't read. Very Twilight Zone thing about getting what you want and then having it be your worst nightmare. Also, this was the one with Rob Cantor on board. He says he was featured in it and he wrote it, but there is no listing for singers on this one, so I have to assume Joe sung all the verses. But given it was so digitized, it really could have been anyone. I don't know. This will be our last group of songs. We're going to look at Stranded Lullaby. It is almost 4 minutes. I might have to stop after that if there's something I want to touch on. And then Dream Suite in C major at 7 minutes for our ending. Let's dive into it.
There's a still tension in the swell of dreamt debris afloat amidst the waves and then dispel.
That's an inversion of the other arpeggiation that we heard in... I don't remember what song it was.
Aimless thoughts and papers blown around. A million moments meant remembered rest in deep dark sound. Game the mess.
I was right about having the human voice again, though.
Know why you are all alone while I'm lost at sea. Maybe we'll be there when you want.
So he's lost at sea, singing about somebody else, coming right after being stuck in a time machine. See, we've either shifted the metaphor or these two songs are disconnected.
Anchorless and unmoored, set amiss. Awake would only prove the fantasy made lucid sense. Sail on, sail on. I'd like to know why you.
We are returning to an older style of harmonic device, though.
Lost at sea. Maybe we'll be there when you
A lot of darkness and tension in this. Also, he's humming at the end of the universe, although in this case, stranded out at sea. But parallels between the sea and space are very common in poetry. Edge of time, okay.
I'd like to know why you are all alone while you're unsure if I am a loose end or a strand that waits for you to
Yeah.
end or
And a very timeless vibe. Once again, moving back to a romantic classical vibe like we had in our opening. In our second track? Eight seconds of silence.
Alone at the edge of a universe, humming a tune.
That is the opening of the
Or
album.
merely dreaming we were snow. A siren sounds like the goddess who promises endless apologies of paradise. And only she can make it right. So things are different tonight.
Okay. What song was this? Was this Murders?
We'll go together in flight.
Some of the psychedelic stuff from Black Rainbows.
It's now and never, or every
Isle Unto Thyself.
never. Await some ambulant directives to take the helm. Believe me, darling, the stars were made for falling, like melting obelisks as tall as another.
Like a time machine sounds. Like, all time machine sound, of course. I'll go get mine right next door and you can hear it.
En ensemble d'enfants, la galaxie s'étend, jardin de l'imagination. Comblez la lacune, voler sans la lune, voir comme nous évoluons. It feels like flying, but maybe we're dying. A cosmic
Oh, man.
confluence of pyramids hologram.
Very Christmassy with those bells.
She knows you heard her staging music murder in line before the show began to be where I am. To know we are beyond above, and how the user rings to show it's perfectly.
I was thinking his voice was getting more compressed over the progression of this track, and right there got pushed out to the side and was even more distorted than it had been previously. So the
You look quite divine
so some of the chiptune from Labyrinth and Time Machine,
these vibrant lights
but with the musical ideas of
surround us as we sail.
we haven't had any songs in 6/8.
Surely the well. Joy mirage's kingdom come. No one left that stays.
Oh man, that's good.
Now that existence is on the way, let's see what we can make. Our part is wholly ending, unlike any final song. So long, so far, we will be atoned.
throwing in the digitization of the back suite. I vaguely remember that the song ends awkwardly. I think that is the last line he sings. You know, y'all told me it'd make more sense if I heard the whole album. It doesn't. No, I'm sure on subsequent listens I'm prepared for things. I understand the flow of it. Maybe after talking with y'all for a few thousand hours and understanding the lore behind it, maybe, the ending will make a bit more sense to me. But, jeez, it perplexed me last time. I'm still flabbergasted. I don't know. Stranded Lullaby, though, was a pretty straightforward lullaby track. Slower, quieter, gentler, just one instrument and the vocals. We had to return back to the clean vocals from the beginning of it and some of the more traditional, older harmonic properties that we saw at the beginning of the beginning of the album. A straightforward song, not one I think I have much to dig into. There were some interesting lines that I picked up, and I'm looking forward to getting to the lyrics. But then we have Dream Suite in C major. Finally, we got these ideas of themes and motifs. I don't know if I can call them that. I really want someone to point out where some of these ideas get presented elsewhere in the album, because as far as I'm concerned, it's a callback. I don't know if there is a definition where it has to be done a specific number of times, but when I hear the word theme or motif, I'm expecting something to pop up multiple times, where multiple is greater than 2. This feels less like a playing of motif and more of just a medley. It's a suite of sounds we've experienced once before. I didn't hear anything that really carried over from track to track here. Many of the ideas were unique upon themselves. I love to be proven wrong. I love modern music that utilizes motif. I just don't see it here, especially since motifs tend to get utilized in new contexts, and while a majority of this final suite does present things in different contexts, they are kind of done in the same way they were. We took straight up the opening lines and sound of Introduction to the Snow. We took the foundation and atmosphere and lead melody lines from Isle into Thyself, the first minute or so of that in here. Those were pretty much done. The only thing that changed was the lyrics. For the most part, it was, like I said, a medley of sections we had heard before, more so than a motif that would show up throughout the album in different contexts. But that's just what I heard on one listen. It's possible, that I missed something. But it was nice to hear everything. This is a nice recollection, and assuming that this is some sort of connected story, it feels like going back through the rest of this album. The rest of this story, re-experiencing ideas of the past. This is a big flashback episode, We got a clip show. To stick with the TV metaphor. We also returned back to many of the production ideas from the beginning. We have the older compressed vocals. We returned back to more of the 50s style of production and sound on this, as well as some of the harmonies that we would see in that era of music. It wraps up really nicely. I'm curious if the story isn't then cyclical. I'm looking forward to hitting the lyrics again on this and taking another stab at them now that I know what's going on with this album. That's kind of a lie. I don't know what's going on with this album. But I do find it interesting that at the beginning we have somebody drifting on the edge of space alone, and at the end we have somebody drifting on the edge of water alone. And water and space are frequently drawn as parallels metaphorically in a lot of poetry. I don't think that this is a journey from track 1 to 11. I think it's a cyclical story where we find out that everything from 2 to 10 is a sort of frame story, where the full story is him sitting in his ship drifting, and he's like, this was my life. And then you go and relive it, and we get back to the end, and we're back in the ship with him, and he's like, that's what I went through. That kind of vibe, right? No time has actually passed between tracks 1 and 11. We've just been told a little story. I will say, though, I appreciated the little bit of darkness in Stranded Lullaby by the end of it. It's something that I've been missing a little in this album. Much like last week, I feel like the musical themes aren't quite matching the lyrical ones, but it's because they're trying to achieve different things. Much like last week when we checked out the Deer Hunter's Antimai, I kind of came to the conclusion that the musical themes weren't exploring the lyrical story and the themes there, which would have been a really dark album, but they were exploring a darker side of, or they were exploring the hearts of the people they were talking about. It did eventually find some dark undertones, but it never really went into a style of music that I thought was fitting for the scenario and the events that the people went through. The same is sort of present here. It's a album about grief, about loss, about death, about moving on with life, about ending of relationships, and yet most of it is fun. There really aren't that many sad or dreary or dark or sorrowful sections here. But I think it's because they're aiming for something else. The music is designed to express a different component than the musical themes, and I don't think I understand what that is this time around, unlike last week. But at least I can appreciate it for that direction, though, as I mentioned, I still kind of wish they explored a little bit more musical sense that tied in with what's going on. There's definitely, the element, dancing through the pain, right? Making sad lyrics with happy songs, and, allowing yourself to dance alongside it or laugh alongside your hardships, that kind of thing, lightening the mood in a sense. But lyrically, this album it's heavy. Not in a way that I think is dark heavy, but it just contains multitudes. It feels interesting to pair something of this magnitude lyrically with a lighthearted feel. Not so much about just being bright and happy about sorrowful songs, but just that it feels serious. And it feels strange to put fun, happy music next to that serious vibe. And so I did like when Stranded Lullaby introduced a bit of tension there. There was another track with some tension. Oh, White Ball. The end of White Ball had some in there as well. But once again, they were done to elevate something specific in the music more so than delivering a story beat alongside the lyrics. So there's intentionality to it, I think. I don't want to detract too much from what they're doing just because I don't get it, because I don't really get most of this. But it was something that I think a little bit of contrast would have helped. Though the album was contrasty in other ways. So again, it's not a real big issue. It's just something I wish we would have gotten a little bit of. Let me hit some lyrics, see what's going on with those. Stranded Lullaby is the thoughts, very poetic and vague thoughts of somebody stranded and adrift. No way to stop, nowhere to go. They can just float on. Now this is all done through the perception of water. The very first thing, there's still a tension in the swell. We talk about waves later on. At one point it says, I'm lost at sea, I need to sail on. This idea of water. But coming right after Time Machine and being stranded and being alone, they're in space-time, in between dimensions. I still think that metaphorically, or I still think that the ocean in this track is a metaphorical ocean. Regardless, they seem very confused and for once finally introspective. The chorus says, I'd like to know why you are all alone, why I'm lost at sea. Anchorless and unmoored, said amiss. Awake would only prove the fantasy made lucid sense. See what I mean about this stuff being like vague? I kind of get the idea that he doesn't understand why they're not together. This you and this I. They're both alone. But they're just alone normally, and he's alone, lost at sea, despite him trying to fix his mistakes, the time machine, right? I don't know if I'm supposed to be piecing these songs together. I still think it's a series of vignettes of maybe things that aren't connected, but maybe it's not. It says, I like the outro though. It says, I'd like to know why you are all alone while I trails off. You're unsure if I'm a loose end or a strand that waits for you to mend or understand. I like that. A loose end is something at the end of something, like a string that just is frayed off at the end of it, you know? It's something that's incomplete, but a strand is something that's been divorced from the whole entirely. Both are sort of negative, both require different perspectives to get. But I like this. It says that waits for you to mend or understand. You're not sure if you should fix me or just figure out who I am. So, where does this take us with the final track? I vaguely remember comments telling me this was about death. And it was because of this one line. It feels like flying. No, that's not it. Where is the one? Oh, it's the intro. Alone at the edge of a universe, humming a tune, for merely dreaming we were snow. This is the intro to the album. It changes though. It says, a siren sounds like the goddess who promises endless apologies of paradise, and only she can make it right, so things are different tonight. We'll go together in flight. I vaguely remember comments telling me that this was a song about somebody who had lost their loved one and was ready to accept death in order to be with them again. And that's what the song, that's why it ends the way it does, with the crest of the wave beginning to make a crash and the louder sound, or the sound getting louder and louder, and then just an abrupt end. If that's true, it completely changes my entire read on the album, because I had a very different understanding of it. In which case, the time machine was to go back and save them? I don't know, but then if you're in the time machine, how do you get to the water? Like, it still doesn't make any sense from that perspective. Verse 1, though, the dude opened up a thesaurus. It's now and never a reverie endeavor awaits somnambulant directives to take the helm. Believe me, darling, the stars were made for falling like melting obelisks as tall as another realm. The melting obelisks line is one of the first times that I've heard any reference to the Twin Towers. I'm still not sold on that. Y'all gotta let me know if there's more in here that I missed, but the whole 9/11 musical thing, a commemoration of the people and the towers and how we've moved on and explored the grief of the event. I'm not seeing it in here. I'm really not. We bring back the French from Space Station number 7. Except Joe sings it this time, but the translation is identical. Some of these sections are just, they feel like they are taken from other songs directly, in which case they don't really mean much here. Once again, it's sort of like a clip show where their context, why they fit together, is because they're pieces of other things. They don't actually tell a cohesive story, but you understand they fit together because in a larger context, they all came from somewhere else. So like the French part, right? It's, a set of children. The galaxy extends, garden of imagination. Fill the gap, fly towards the moon, see how we evolve. What does that have to do with any of this? 2 stanzas later says, children born of one emotion are devotion's deepest ocean. This came from one of the other tracks, and I can't remember where it came from. It says that the music here is played from, it's a motif from the Mind Electric, which I think I called that out. It was one of the first times we had more of a digital sound going on. What's the correlation between that? Why is the music from one song playing under the lyrics for another? Verse 3, though, says, you look quite divine tonight, here among these vibrant lights, pure delights surround us as we sail, signed yours truly, the whale. I don't know who the whale is, but it seems that our protagonist has found his woman. Maybe assuming everyone's right and this is a thing about suicide, then he's committed it and he's in the afterlife and he's with his romantic interest now. I don't know though. It ends with a goodbye though. It says bye, hi, sigh, Hawaii. We never meant to part, sublime thy art, one light higher than the sun, invisible to some until its time. Is this the white light that beckons you? The stereotypical one? It's invisible until it's your time, and then you'll see it, and it's higher than the sun. It's pretty bright. And then the waves crash, and then the song ends. I don't know. Here's what I will say, though, to wrap this up. I'm intrigued. Generally, I like this album. Musically, I think it's fun to listen to. Many of the songs are a jam. There's some stuff in here that I've had a hard time finding outside of, once again, Steven Universe's musical songs. So it's nice to find melodies like that. Fresh that I can dive into. It's only in a few tracks in here, but it was still a nice surprise. Many of the songs, as I said, are pleasant to listen to. They have nice hooks. There's a nice evolution of ideas throughout this album. And it's an eclectic combination of sounds. There's rapping in the middle of this album that praises so much of classical and pop's past that that kind of comes out of nowhere and somehow it fits. I don't know. It's an eclectic album and I enjoyed my time with it. I want to give it another listen, but I'm not too pressured to do that quickly. I originally wanted to give it another listen completely all the way through with no breaks, but that was before I realized it's actually full of breaks and it's only the first few songs that string together. While I will say that this experience of pausing every couple of tracks and taking 30 to 60 minutes before getting to the next one is not optimal, it wasn't as bad as I was anticipating, given that most of the songs ended up being isolated towards the end of the album. So I do want to give it some time to digest, for me to explore some other stuff, kind of clear the brain a little bit, come back to it with a fresh mind rather than one that just got done listening to it, and hear it in a more casual setting. I'll probably wait a week or so for that. See if I can't fit it into my listening schedule. I'm caught up on like all the new releases, which is pretty cool. So I got space to explore stuff. Maybe I'll give it another listen. But I am intrigued. It was fun to get through. It entertained me, and it kept me engaged casually and critically. On top of all that, I cannot wait for the comments to come in and y'all let me know what the heck is going on in here. Seriously. Because this is just it's perplexing. It's a bit frustrating with just how vague it is. And the crazy thing is, if I had decided to read every single annotation on Genius here, well, this video probably wouldn't have been much longer, but the time it took me to record it probably would have been an extra hour, hour and a half, because that was so much additional information I would have had to read and understand. Y'all, as a fandom, are ridiculously passionate about figuring out this cryptic art. Unfortunately, I don't know how much help I was in helping anyone understand it. But maybe that's all the requester wanted me when they wanted me to check this album out, was just experience it. Maybe they weren't looking too much for answers, because honestly, I don't think anybody could figure this out on a first listen. Those are my thoughts. Miracle Musicals Hawaii Part 2. Let me know your thoughts. Is there anything in here that stood out to you? Anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Give me additional information for any of that. You got your own perspectives or opinions. Toss that stuff in the comments section. All that. Just fill up the comments. I'll read them all. I promise. I'm still reading comments on the Dream Suite in C major. It gets about a comment a week still. It is one of my most popular videos, and I read every single word that pops up in that comment section. I'll do the same here. That's not a special promise. I do that for everything. Somebody commented on a video from like 2020, and they're like, you probably don't read this far back, but here's some context for it. And I was like, hey, dude, thanks. I don't really remember the song too much, but I always appreciate some extra context on it. Like, I read every comment, seriously. My channel's still small enough to do that. Alright, what comes after that? Oh, yeah. The description box. Link to Linktree in there. It takes you here. You can find my music, which probably isn't as hard to understand. It's a little bit more surface level. Ways to support the channel. You can find a link to the Discord server. Come and chat with the community. I show up there for almost every day. I'm pretty active there. You want to chat with me? I'll be there. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today, which is good, because I'm mentally exhausted now. I'm going to go take a break. Y'all have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening. Remember to be critical, not cynical. Be back tomorrow, 10 a.m. I did this backwards. I don't know. My brain's fried. 10 a.m., 11 a.m. tomorrow morning. Eastern Standard Time. So what is that? 4 p.m. UTC. We're going to do a live stream. It'll be 2 hours long. Come by, show up, we'll chit chat, listen to some cool music. All right, that wraps it up for this one, y'all. Have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.